Hey guys, it's Jim. Thanks for tuning in. Today is episode 7 or part 7 of my Aurora HDR 2018 tutorial, and I'm having a lot of fun making these videos. We've covered a lot of ground, I think, so far, and there's a few more things I want to hit on before I put a sort of a wrapper on this series. Today we're talking about textures and blend modes, and so this is a lot of fun. It's a great way to do some sort of creative experimentation with your photos and to turn something that you might otherwise ignore into a photo that you actually like quite a bit. And so let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so I have this photo. Now this was shot in Rome. That's the Pantheon. And I went over there at night. As ever, I'm hopeful for wonderful light and a great sunset and no crowds. I didn't get any of that, as you can see. It was crowded as can be. There's millions of people here. In fact, I did this with ghosting, but I didn't like it, so I actually unchecked the ghosting removal and just let it ghost. It actually looks better. So I don't know if you've tried that with your photos. A lot of times when we have crowds, I think the intent is to sort of slow that down a little bit. If it's one or two people, it's one thing, but a massive crowd like this, it's really hard to get 100% ghost-free sort of thing. So I just uncheck ghosting a lot of times, and they kind of ghost out a little bit, and then there's enough of them there that you can see kind of what's happening. Anyway, I digress. Textures and blend modes. So textures is something that I only got into a couple of years ago. I used to not really care for them that much. I thought it was kind of distracting. I didn't really see the reason for doing it in many ways, and I didn't like them a whole lot. And then for whatever reason, I just decided to start experimenting with them. Aurora and Luminar are having layers. They both make it so easy. And I found something, and what I found out is that I actually really love textures. And in fact, I created my own texture pack. I started collecting them on my travels. And so if you go to my blog, and this is a shameless plug, I apologize. If you go to my blog at nomadicpursuits.com and you scroll right over here in the top menu, click on textures, and it'll open up this page. I've got one texture pack called Urban Distress. It does sell for $10. It's 10 high quality textures. You can see it there. All right, let's get back to the photo. But the reason I bring that up because I'm going to use one of those textures in this photo today. And I often get questions when I've done sky overlays. People ask me where I get them, and I take those myself. But I don't have a pack of those. I might do that one day. But anyway, textures and blend modes. Okay, so this all involves layers. So we've got the layers panel open, as you can see. And essentially, here's how I start. This is a base HDR, no deghosting applied. Essentially what I do with textures is I just add it immediately. I rarely make edits to a photo unless it's really dark. So if I have a really dark foreground, I might come into top and bottom tuning and lift the exposure in the foreground or the bottom of the frame in order to balance the light. But otherwise I pretty much just leave the base layer completely alone, and I just go straight to adding the texture. So in the layers panel, say plus, add new image layer. And I've got textures here. These are the ones that I was talking about. I'm going to use this one, Grungy Wall. And it adds a new layer on top of your base layer. Now, whenever you add a new layer, as you probably know, it adds at 100% opacity. And essentially all you can see is the new layer, right, which is this texture. So the first thing I do is I drop this to about 20%. And that allows me to see through it. And here's kind of where the fun begins. Now, blend modes. If you just click on that right there, right, it says normal. It's not going to say blend modes. You won't see that word, but these are blend modes. Normal is the default, and normal is basically just your texture layer laying on top of your other photo at 100% opacity. Now, I changed it to 20 as you saw, but normal is not really even a blend mode. It's just, It's just the top layer, depending on the opacity that you choose, showing some amount of the bottom layer. So it's not really blending as much as it is just an opportunity to change the opacity and have a look at it. So you have these blend modes, right? Normal is the default. You have all these different ones that you can kind of click through. Some look good. That doesn't actually look so bad. Usually color burn's kind of intense. Some of them look pretty good. Like I like this one, overlay for this filter. For this photo. Subtract, really the point here is that there are so many different variations that it's really impossible to predict how one of your textures is going to look with a particular blend mode on a particular photo. If you wanted to, you can Google blend mode definitions and you can find how it defines what they do. but sometimes the definitions get kind of technical, and I've read them sometimes, and I'm still scratching my head, and I just say, you know what? I don't really care. I don't need to memorize this. All I need to know is I want to click on one, and if it looks good, I want to use it, right? So I just recommend experimenting with blend modes. I'm going to go with overlay in this case. I like that one. It's not too intense in the areas where there's already some good texture, but it does show up in the sky where there's nothing. It's just a clear blue sky. And so usually what I do then is I'll start bumping the opacity back up. So, let's say I go to 40 something, but what you'll see is the texture is now appearing more heavily in the pavers here in the foreground. And I don't really like that. So this is where after you've applied your texture, reduce the opacity so you can see it, change the blend mode if you want to. You can leave it at normal if you want. And then done those adjustments, this is where I come into the brush. Now, I could paint this texture and just paint it into the sky and leave it out of the buildings, but I kind of like it in the buildings. To me, it kind of flows with the photo. So instead, I'm going to go to Erase, and I'm going to take the opacity slider down to, let's say 35%, and I'm going to use my right bracket key, and I'm just going to erase the texture from some of this foreground. And again, that's simply because, in my opinion and to my eyes, the cobblestones have plenty of texture in them already. This texture doesn't show up a whole lot, and where it does show up, it kind of makes it a little busier. And so I just kind of want to remove that. Notice I'm skipping that sign, and I'm kind of skipping over these people. I'm just kind of doing the pavers primarily. You can always check your mask with that eyeball button. You can see what I've erased. Because I'm at a low opacity, you have to go over it a lot of times to remove any amount of it of any significance. And since we're just kind of experimenting here, I'm just going to leave it at that. And that looks pretty good. I'm going to say done. All right. So now, even though you've done that, you could come back here and say, well, maybe I want to try a different blend mode, right? The mask is going to stick because the mask is on the layer. So you can come in here now and say, well, now that I've got the not layers. You got to make sure you click blend modes. Now that I've got the blend mode, the texture applied to the right areas with the right opacities, I can change blend mode. So again, another thing I recommend doing is coming back through, and if you're not 100% sold on the blend mode that you're on, experiment some and come in here and just see what you get. You can see where it's been removed more heavily in the bottom. I still like overlay best, so I'm going to go back to that. And so that's really experimentation, as I've said, and I'm going to say that word a lot, but it's a great creative outlet, a great way to take photos you may not otherwise like and turn them into something of interest. You could just take a really common object. You could even take a portrait and put a texture in the background, sort of like if you have, I don't know if you do model photos or just family photos, pictures of your kids, whatever. You could apply a texture sort of around them to create some sort of creative interest. And then you could add denoise to the texture, really smooth it out and create a sort of a blurred, sort of textured background. There's a million things you can do, really. So I've got the texture looking how I want it to look in the sky, and I've got it sort of masked in where I want it to look. And here's my last thing that I usually do with texture files, and that is I'll go add a new layer, and I'll add an adjustment layer, and I'll just make adjustments to it. Now, because it would take a while to do this, I'm just going to use a preset. I've got some presets that I've been working on for Aurora 18, and these will be coming out pretty soon. So I'm going to use one of these. Now, this comes in at 100%. It's way too much at 100%. So I'm going to back that off a little bit to, let's just say we leave it at 35%. But this texture has, you probably saw it was black and white, didn't have any color in it. So I'm going to bring the saturation back a little bit. I'm going to cool off the photo a little bit. So basically I added a preset and then I'm just going to make adjustments to that preset. And I'm going to come over here to top and bottom tuning. I want to darken the exposure a little bit at the top, add some contrast, a little vibrance, cool it off. I'm just kind of changing the colors and tones. And again, every photo is different. And so I just recommend experimenting with this stuff. And I'm kind of doing the same in the bottom, just kind of experimenting. And again, I'm at 35% opacity, so you can come back and adjust the opacity of this layer. In fact, I think I'm going to take it down a little bit to about 30. And you know what? I'm actually going to go a little bit darker in the foreground. I think I like that better. And a little bit cooler. And there you go. So let me show you what just that addition did. There's the before and the after. So it's just, you know, you can come into each filter individually and make whatever adjustments you see fit. This is just easier for me to grab a preset, because the thing about presets is if you're creating a preset to make a beautiful photo on a texture, I don't want to say I don't care, but it doesn't matter as much because I'm going to adjust it anyway. And because of the texture, all the ideas of reality and natural and all that are kind of out the window, because to me, once you've added a texture, you sort of enter the realm of art. And so, you know, use a preset, stack presets on multiple layers. You know, hey, guess what? Stack a new texture on another layer. You could mask this base texture into the sky. You could go to get a different texture on the next layer, mask it into the foreground. Just get creative. So my point is, reality's out the window anyway. So why not grab a preset, do some colors, do some different stuff, and just get creative. But let me show you what we started with. This is the middle exposure from a bracket set, and this is the end result. So, you know, we've done, in fact, I might actually come into here, and I might take the luminance of the blues down a little bit, just to further darken that sky a little bit, and try to maybe give it a little more blue. You know, not a massive change, just a little bit, but again, it's all art. Reality's out the window, and I'm just having fun. The point is, add textures, experiment with blend modes, change the opacity of the layer, and experiment with brushing the texture in and or out of different parts of the photo, and then experiment with blend modes again, and then go stick another layer on top of that texture layer and add a preset or just add some filters and experiment with colors and tones until you get the photo looking just the way you want it. You know, I might come in here now and just say, well, I like that, but I'm going to add another adjustment layer. I'm going to go get a completely different preset, and I'm going to take this one down because it's going to be way too intense at 56%. In fact, I'm going to take it down, you know, let's say around 30. And there you go. So let me show you. There's the before layer, and there it is after. A little bit more color pop. I actually like that. I mean, it's really pretty, and I'm kind of making this up as I, well, not kind of, I am making this up as I go in this part. So just experiment, have fun. You might look at this and say, yeah, but that's too orange. Okay, great. Guess what? You come into HSL, you go into the saturation of the orange, and you take that down so it's not as intense. That's the beauty of Aurora. So much flexibility, so many things you can do. Just go have fun with it. I hope that helps. Spend some time on this. Experiment, have fun. If you have any questions, let me know. If you like this video, please like it, leave a comment, share it with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe. And that's it, my friends. I hope this video is helpful. Keep tuning in. I got a few more videos planned for this Aurora HDR 2018 tutorial series. And that's it for today, my friends. Thanks for coming by. Adios.